Hello, this is episode 7.4. Um, I guess age 7, um, a lot of significant things happened in my life. Like I keep repeating. So this is 7.4. Where I left off at age 7, I think the primary reason it was so significant is my dad literally was at the pinnacle of his career. He was doing very well professionally. That's the happiest actually I've seen him in his professional life and personal life as well. Things were going very well financially for us around that time. So we got our home remodeled. We got a whole bunch of new furniture. We bought a new car. My dad had a new job, a very good job, well paying job. He was doing very well in his job, was respected, well respected. And around this time, I remember this event. It was my brother's 14th birthday. My dad wanted to do something really big for him because I think he was just like so happy and he wanted to do something big and fabulous. And he told my brother, just pick, where you want the birthday to happen. So my brother picked this. Back then, I think later on it was just a regular restaurant, but back then there were only a couple of uh, Indian Chinese, and they're not called Indian Chinese. It was Chinese. It was more uh, Indian Chinese cuisine back then was not so spicy and so much Indian. It was a little bit more mild, flavorful, very exquisite. So he picked this restaurant called Lung Fung, and it was literally only one of three Chinese restaurants in all of Hyderabad back then, three or four, right? One was hiking in Bashir Bagh, and one was Nanking in Secunderabad, and one was this Lung Fung, which was pretty exquisite. I remember we were so excited. So there was a large party, and there was a very large table reserved for us. It was all my brother's friends, and my brother went to an all boys school. It was, I think, what it was. I wouldn't even say one of the. It was the most elite school for boys in all of Hyderabad. That's what they picked for my brother. It was HPS, Hyderabad Public School, and they used to refer to it as HPS. It had two branches. One was in Begumpet, one was in Ramantpur, where my brother went to. So it was one of few schools that had a CBSE syllabus, and all his friends were at the table, and they all got dropped off in their cars. They were from pretty well-to-do families, and so we all sat at the table. My brother, like I said, he was very confident. He sat at the head of the table, and it was all of them, and it was just our family, the three of us, and we sat at one corner, and my brother sat at the head of the table, and he just like took charge, and he ordered all these items. And I remember that was the first time I had um, lemon fish, boneless fish, and it was such a good item, and all the items were so exquisite. It was very, very nice birthday party, very grand birthday party, grand and expensive and exquisite in all ways. So the one thing I noticed there was, I think because of the school that they went to, and it was such, like I said, it was the most elite boys' school in all of the city. They were all conversing with each other in English. All the boys, all my brother's friends, and it was a really large table. I think there were at least 15 to 20 boys, maybe 20, because the table total size was 25. We had literally occupied almost the entire restaurant. And they were all conversing with each other in English, and they were all laughing and chatting. A couple of them tried to make conversation with me, and I didn't even open my mouth. I didn't even say yes or no. Um, yeah, I know I'm belaboring this point, but I literally was very painfully shy. I couldn't make eye contact with anybody. I felt very shy to speak to anybody. So I would always hope that I like sink into a corner and nobody would notice me. I didn't want to be noticed, except the times that I was dancing. So I actually wanted to be noticed, I think, but speaking or speaking up was not my forte. Or uh, so I just barely nodded. I didn't even say yes or no. So think after we came home, my brother felt a little awkward that his friends were all, not all, a lot of them who were seated close to me were trying to make conversation with me, and and I was so intimidated. I guess I was only 7. It was hard to explain that when you're 7 and the rest of all these boys are like, um, 14. They seem very big. They seem very grown up to you. It's very intimidating to be surrounded by them, and you don't have anybody of your age group. But anyways, I think he felt a little awkward that or embarrassed or disappointed, whatever it was, like that. I was literally not just nodding my head or doing this and not having a conversation with any of his friends. Um, Around this time, my parents had slowly started considering the idea of, not seriously, but they just began considering the idea of switching schools. And the main reason for that is my school, Sylvania Garden School, it only ran till 5th grade. So my brother went to school there too, and he switched in 5th grade to HBS. So it, it was a while away, like I was only in 2nd grade, but they were just started thinking about it. So my brother came and told my parents, and because he was older, he um, used to converse with my parents like adults, and he said, she's not able to speak. She doesn't have any. She's not able to converse in English, and it's going to be a very big problem. It's going to be a very big problem for her because. So in Sylvania Garden School, I did learn English. In fact, it was my favorite subject, and I was the first ranker. But you could really speak any language. Most of them spoke in like, because they were Marwadi, they were all wealthy, mind you, but they were Marwadis, Gujaratis, Muslims. It was a very multicultural place, and you could pretty much speak like Hindi, English, Telugu, whatever you wanted. There were very few Telugu people in that school. So he was concerned. He was like, how is she going to manage once she says switches schools? Because my parents would have definitely put me in a convent school. And Sylvania Garden School was not a Hindi medium school, it was an English medium school. But during recess, casual conversations like those could be whatever language you wanted, which was Hindi because a lot of people there were North Indian. So so the general assumption was that I was really quiet and silent in the party, and 2 hours I didn't speak. The general assumption was that I was having trouble with the language. So my parents, sat me down. My dad told me, and interestingly, in my home, the language of conversation, which is very different than other, like, typical middle class Telugu homes, they speak in their mother tongue. But in my home, usually most of them spoke in English. That was the language that we used at home. My grandmother didn't. So I spent most of the time with my grandmother. So I was the only one who spoke in Telugu. And in my Amama's home, it was a mix of English and Telugu. So I spoke Telugu there. And with my grandmother, I spoke Telugu. And with my parents, if they spoke in Telugu, I spoke in Telugu. But if they spoke in English, uh, I always replied in Telugu. So the assumption was that I couldn't carry out a conversation at that table at my brother's party because of my discomfort with the language. I was too young to understand myself or articulate that it was not so much of a language thing, but more of me being shy and introvert. And it was just getting worse and worse by the day. Like, I became mostly like an observer, and I didn't really speak much at all. However, it was also true that I never spoke um, at home. In school, I did, because that was the uh, medium of education. It was an English medium school. But as soon as I left the school premises, I never spoke a word of English, socially or at home. So here I am. I was 7 years old. While it's not uncommon to only speak Telugu in other households, my household was different. My parents and brother used to communicate mostly in English, actually. So it was a bit bizarre and uncommon that I'd spent 7 years in this home, growing around people who 80% of the time communicated in English. And in all those 7 years, I had never spoken even a word, a single word of English. Even yes or no, I would say in Telugu. So after my brother told them this, my parents started to get a little worried, saying that, yes, how will she manage in a school where even the casual conversations are happening in English when she doesn't know the language. So the reason this is such an important event in my life is, until this incident, I had never really opposed my parents or opposed anybody. Actually, I didn't really say no, it's not this, or argue, or I never I never heard myself saying no until 7, and I have a pretty good memory. So whatever it was that people wanted me to do, I did it. So I remember this because this is the first time I sort of kind of disagreed with my parents initially. So my dad said, how will you manage? You'll switch schools in 3 years. So you have a good 3 years, because I was still only in second grade. But you need to start getting comfortable in speaking in English, and you have a very good platform. He didn't use the word platform, but that was his meaning. You have a very good platform. We communicate in English all the time. All you have to do is answer and attempt to answer, and we'll correct you, and this is the best way to learn. And you still have 3 years, but you really need to start speaking in English. So my mother also said this thing. So this was the first time I actually referred to my report card, and I said, no, I don't need to learn it. I am very good at it. I get like 100%, 98%, which was actually difficult to get in English, because it's a language. So some answer somewhere. It's not like math where it's black and white. So I would always be first in class in English subject, in all subjects actually. But definitely English, I would stand the delta between what my English writing class was this thing. So they didn't buy it. They never bought it that the marks were indicative of a person's abilities. And to a large extent, they were right also. So they're like, okay, yeah, sure, you can study, you bookish knowledge you have, yes, you can read and write, but communication is different. It's different to read and write and be good at that. And for some reason, they had it in their head that I memorized it, but I didn't. But anyways, but they had a point. They had a valid point. But communication is different. So they would start communicating to me more and more in English. But I just wouldn't respond, not even a word, not even yes or no. I would always communicate back only in Telugu. So then they kind of, I think they mutually decided, my brother, mother, and father, not my grandmother because she wasn't so that comfortable in English, but they told my grandmother also that let's not just stop communicating with her in Telugu. Let's all communicate with her only in English. And if she doesn't respond, we let's not like talk to her back. Let's not reward that. So I know this is typically in most households, it's the other way. In Indian American households, actually, they communicate in the regional language only, so that the kids are forced to learn the regional language like Telugu or Hindi because they only speak in English. So the opposite happened to me, where they just stopped communicating to me in Telugu altogether. So this lasted for about a week, but it didn't really yield any results. So because I was not very vocal when I didn't like something, I actually started becoming a stubborn child. That's the only way I could oppose something, right? I would just refuse to participate. So I was a very stubborn child, extremely stubborn to a fault. So I was like, okay, like you can not talk to me, do whatever you like. I won't talk. So it didn't yield any results. So there was one time, and this is an incident is so crystal clear in my mind, and it actually is was very impactful in my life also. So I was sitting in the living room, and my mother and father, like, they tried this 1 week, it didn't work. Everybody in the family tried, only it didn't work. I still wasn't communicating. And then they started like kind of, telling me repeatedly, almost like nagging, like parents do, like I also do to my children. They kept saying, they tried reason with me, saying, how will you manage, how will you do that, like, you have to communicate in English, you have to speak in this, like, speak it at home, otherwise you'll struggle and it'll be very difficult for you to do that. You have to practice it now, you're going to switch schools, blah blah blah. And they were doing that, and I was internally feeling very upset. I didn't show it, but I was internally feeling very upset. And I didn't know how to like show my upset. I didn't know how to oppose them, how to tell them no. I didn't have the courage to look at my parents and say, like, say anything. But this is so interesting. So in India, we frequently used to have power cuts where all the lights used to go away, and then people would scramble around, trying to find candles. And my Bama would go up, bring a candle from her room. That all process took a while to even bring the candle, like 15, 20 minutes. And the lights would go off, like, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for half an hour, and sometimes for 5 hours at a time later on. Okay. So I was struggling with that, and it's almost like God helped me. And suddenly there was a power cut, and this was around 7:30 p.m. at night. I remember the time also very clearly. I remember where I was sitting, in which chair I was sitting. My parents were sitting right next across me, and I was sitting in a chair with my hand over the arm like this, and I was getting very upset. I didn't know how to oppose them. And suddenly there was a power cut, and there was pitch darkness in the room. And I felt so empowered because now I don't need to make eye contact with them. I don't need to see their reactions to see if my response is disappointing them or making them angry. I don't need to deal with that. So I didn't even think that eventually the power is going to come back on. But I didn't think. And I had this thing in my pent up thing in my heart. So then the power went off and it was pitch dark. And then I felt comfortable crying, like silently. I would, like, tears started streaming down my face, but they couldn't see it. And I was also pretty upset, pretty angry. So then they said, why do you not, like, why? Tell us the reason why you don't speak it, you know? And then I literally yelled at them because it was dark, pitch dark, right? I didn't even know where they were, like, I kind of knew where they were sitting. And at 7 years old, and imagine a girl who's never spoken a word of English in her life, at home, and never said no to her parents, never even looked anybody in the eye. It was dark, so I literally raised my voice, and in impeccable, perfect, exquisite English for a 7-year-old, I say, because it's the language of the British who made us slaves, and I refuse to utter a word of that language of the people who enslaved us. This is my sentence. I remember this sentence. It was complicated words, pretty complicated for a 7-year-old. And the funniest thing is, the very first sentence of English that I spoke to my parents in my life, the very first full sentence, was that I refused to speak English. So, and then I just kept quiet. And there was like silence on the other end. And as soon as it came out, I kept quiet. It was the first sentence of English I spoke in my life, and I'm literally refusing. It was the first time I said no to anybody. Forget my parents, whom I wouldn't even dream of saying no. But because I was a very goody, perfect child, like they would keep saying she never says no, people still say that about me, that I never say no. But anyways, it was the first time I actually opposed anything. And I was yelling and crying at the same time at my parents. And I was only 7. So I said that and I kept quiet. And then I got so scared because now I realize the lights are going to come on, and there was pin drop silence on the other end, like between my mother and father. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble. And I was thinking that, and I was hoping the power cut would last for like 1 hour and everybody would forget what I did, because I thought I was like done the worst thing in my life by saying this. But unfortunately for me, like 2 minutes after this, and I was crying now a little bit, like sniffling because I was so angry. Unfortunately for me, the lights came on. and my parents are sitting right in front of me. My eyes immediately became downcast. And I was so scared of the repercussion of me opposing them, and in such a manner. And then as soon as the lights came on, my dad got up. And it was the scariest moment of my life. My parents have never hit me or beaten me ever, like, or not even slapped me. They haven't even like so much as like patted me, So they've done that 2 times, but those times I'll remember. In my story, I'll tell you why they did that, but never. Okay, so, but my dad, he was not at all short-tempered. He was so gentle, but once in a while, if he did get into a temper tantrum, he would not hurt anybody, but he would be really angry. He would really shout and maybe like break things around the house. But he would never hurt anybody. But I've seen my dad's temper, which was very, very, very rare. Like I said, once in 2 years, once in 1 year, something should be horribly wrong. And I thought this was one of those things, So I was very scared. And as soon as the lights came on, my dad got up. And it was the scariest moment of my life. I wish the earth would open. I would just disappear somewhere. Because I've never opposed my dad. Like, I was his favorite. I would always like love him and he would love me back. So he got up and it was just like 3 feet, started coming towards me, and then he raised his hand, and um, I kind of felt, okay, this is the first time I'm going to get slapped in my life ever. And then, literally the eighth wonder of the world happened. And that's when what made me realize my parents are so different, so unique, so special. He hugged me. He hugged me and he said, in the most gentle voice, he said, he used to call me Anuma. Uh, he said, Anuma, you are right. We were wrong. And this is something very special because I can tell you in my time, Indian parents, no Indian parent that I knew ever said this to their kid. Okay. So it showed what a special person my father was. Look, I was just this piddly 7-year-old, and I was opposing him, not doing what he was asking me to do, yelling at him for the first time, yelling at both of them. And he really said that. And he just hugged me and he said, we won't force you anymore. I did not know my mother's reaction at that point. I thought maybe she's still upset because the push came from her a little bit more. But she surprised me too. The next day onwards, anytime anybody visited home, she would actually narrate this incident to them. Like literally for the next 1 month, any relative came home, she would narrate this incident to them, and she said, we were always thinking why this girl doesn't speak English, but it's not like she does not know. Look how she's so sorted out. She doesn't speak it because she has a lot of national pride and she has a lot of comfort level about who she is. And she said it's a language of the British who enslaved us, who made us slaves. So that's why she's not speaking. It's a form of protest in her heart. And she would keep repeating this incident like anybody who came home. And she was so proud of me for standing up and for having that clear thought and that confidence in me. And that's when I realized my parents were, exceptional parents because, I'm sure a lot of parents are very loving, much more loving than them, in fact, very caring, maybe even much more caring. But my parents were proud of me for thinking on my own, for not just blindly following them. And I can tell you that that's pretty exceptional amongst Indian parents. So, from that time onwards, I kind of softened and I said, I mean, they're being so nice, so there's no need for me to be stubborn and hold my space. And I did start speaking a little bit English at home as well, slowly. But the lesson I get from this is, older is not always wiser, and know that you always have to be open-minded and humble, that you don't know everything. Somebody younger than you may have a different perspective. But all of that, it's easy to say learn from a younger person, older person, but you cannot learn if your mind is not open. And your mind cannot be open if you don't have the humility to say, but maybe you don't know everything. Maybe you could be wrong about many things. And I learned that from my parents. So tomorrow I will move back to, maybe I'll do a 7.5 or maybe I'll do 8, but thank you.